Chapter 1. The silver blade hovered a fraction of an inch from the Alpha King's throat. Odetta held her breath. The tense, heavy canvas walls muffled the howling wind outside, but inside the air tasted of wood smoke, old leather, and impending death. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She pressed the hilt tighter, her knuckles turning a bloodless white. This was for her village, for the ashes and the silence he had left behind. She pushed the blade down. Before the silver could even graze his golden skin, a colossal force clamped around her wrist. It wasn't a hand. It was a vice of pure, unbreakable iron. Odetta gasped, the sound stolen by the sudden, suffocating pressure. The king's eyes snapped open. They were not the groggy, unfocused eyes of a sleeping man. They burned with a molten, terrifying amber light that seemed to pierce straight through the darkness of the tent. In a single fluid motion that defied all human logic, Thorn twisted her arm. The silver knife clattered uselessly onto the thick, bare furs. He flipped her beneath him, pinning her to the icy floorboards. The impact drove the air from her lungs in a fractured wheeze. "A bold choice," Thorn murmured. His voice was a dark, leaden rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and straight into her bones, but an exceptionally foolish one. He leaned closer, his looming shadow swallowing her entirely. Odetta braced for the sickening snap of her neck. She glared up at him, channeling her absolute terror into a blazing, desperate hatred. She refused to look away. She refused to grant him the satisfaction of her fear. But the killing blow never came. Instead, Thorn froze. His chest, bare and ridged with the silvered lines of old battles, heaved a sudden, shuddering breath. His pupils dilated rapidly, expanding until the brilliant amber was nearly eclipsed by pitch black. Odetta felt the precise moment the atmosphere shifted. The murderous, heavy tension evaporated, replaced by something far more dangerous. His scent enveloped her completely, a dizzying, overwhelming mix of crushed pine needles, approaching rain, and raw, undisputed power. It clouded her mind, making her thoughts sluggish and confused. He lowered his massive head, his nose trailing along the delicate curve of her jaw. Odetta shivered. A treacherous liquid heat pooled low in her stomach, entirely at odds with the situation. Mine. The word was barely spoken. It was a feral, possessive vibration pressed directly against her collarbone. His wolf was surfacing. The realization hit Odetta with a crushing weight. She was an assassin, sent to end his brutal reign. Yet the Alpha King was looking at her, inhaling her scent, as if she were the only drop of water in a barren wasteland. "Get off me, you monster!" Odetta spat. She thrashed against his grip, kicking her legs in a futile attempt to dislodge him. Thorn's hold did not loosen, but the nature of it shifted. It became less of a physical restraint and more of an inescapable embrace. His mind was clearly a battlefield. She could see it in the violent ticking of his jaw, the rigid tension cording his thick neck. Reason demanded he execute the assassin who had dared to breach his command tent. It was the law of the pack, but the primal, ancient magic of the wolf screamed to protect the fragile, furious mortal writhing beneath him, his fated mate. "You smell like night rain and iron," Thorn whispered, his breath ghosting hot over her parted lips. He lifted one hand from her wrist, his calloused thumb tracing the fullness of her lower lip. The absolute gentleness of the gesture was terrifying. "Who sent you to me, little assassin?" Odetta bared her teeth, refusing to answer. She twisted her hip, desperately trying to reach the small boot knife she kept hidden. But his weight was an immovable mountain. The friction of their bodies sparked a sudden, unwanted current of electricity between them. Thorn groaned, a deep, raspy sound that made Odetta's pulse hammer erratically against her throat. He leaned in, his lips hovering dangerously close to hers, the heat of his skin searing her through her thin clothes. The intoxicating pull of him was eroding her carefully built defenses. She wanted to stab him. She wanted to close the distance. Suddenly, the heavy canvas flap of the tent was ripped aside. "My king!" General Kale burst into the tent, his heavy broadsword already drawn and gleaming in the dim light. He took in the chaotic scene, the discarded silver knife on the floor, the struggling girl pinned beneath his sovereign. "Assassin!" Kale roared. Without waiting for a command, without pausing to assess his alpha's bizarre posture, the general brought his heavy blade down in a lethal, sweeping arc aimed directly at Odetta's exposed neck. Odetta closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable cold bite of steel. But Thorn moved faster than thought. With a deafening, earth-shattering roar that shook the very canvas of the tent, the Alpha King twisted his massive frame, shielding her completely with his own body. He took the brutal, bone-jarring impact of the broadsword directly across his unprotected back. Blood sprayed across the pale furs. Thorn's blood. Chapter 2. The gilded cage felt no different than a dungeon. Odetta paced the length of the colossal bedchamber. Her bare feet sank into plush ivory rugs. The walls were draped in midnight velvet. A roaring fire crackled in the hearth. It pushed back the mountain chill. Yet she shivered. Thorn had bled for her. The image played on a continuous loop in her mind. His broad back taking that lethal strike. He had locked her in his personal quarters under the guise of an interrogation. In reality, he was hiding her from the Elder Council. The frantic shouts echoing from the throne room below confirmed it. Why protect an assassin? The scent of his blood still lingered on her skin. It mixed with his intoxicating aroma. Crushed pine and approaching rain. It made her pulse hammer an erratic rhythm. She scrubbed her face. She desperately tried to clear her head. She was supposed to kill the monster who slaughtered her people. A sharp tapping sound shattered the silence. Odetta spun around. She snatched a leaden brass candlestick from the mantel. She crept toward the glass. A familiar, entirely unwelcome face pressed against the frost-covered pane. "Pippin!" she hissed. She unlatched the imposing window. The scrawny thief tumbled inside. He brought a gust of freezing wind with him. He landed in an ungraceful heap on the rug. "By the gods, Odetta," Pippin gasped. He brushed snow from his patched tunic. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to scale a werewolf king's fortress?" "You shouldn't be here. I came to rescue you." Pippin puffed out his narrow chest. He took a step forward. His boot caught on the edge of a small crystalline pedestal. "Wait, don't." It was too late. A delicate glass orb plummeted to the floor. It shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. A high-pitched magical hum pierced the air. The warning word. 3 seconds later, the solid oak doors exploded inward. Wood splintered and flew across the room. Thorn stood in the ruined doorway. He was a terrifying vision of primal fury. He was half-shifted, towering and lethal. His golden eyes burned like twin suns. Elongated razor-sharp claws extended from his fingertips. A low bone-rattling snarl vibrated in his chest. His gaze locked onto Pippin. The air in the room instantly plummeted to freezing. Thorn's nostrils flared. He was taking in the scent of another male in his territory, in his mate's quarters. Jealousy rolled off him in suffocating waves. It was dark and absolute. "Mine," Thorn roared. The sound was deafening. Pippin squeaked in terror. He dove behind a velvet chaise lounge. Odetta dropped the candlestick immediately. She held her hands up in surrender. In a blur of motion, Thorn crossed the room. He completely ignored the cowering thief. He lunged directly for Odetta. His imposing frame backed her flush against the cold stone wall. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. His hands slammed against the stone. They bracketed her head. He leaned in close. His face was mere inches from hers. The heat radiating from his skin was blistering. "Who is he?" Thorn demanded. His voice was a dangerous, fractured whisper. "A friend," Odetta choked out. Her heart beat wildly against her ribs. "Just a friend." Thorn leaned closer. His nose dragged along the sensitive curve of her neck. He inhaled deeply. He was scent-marking her. He was overwriting the thief's presence with his own overwhelming dominance. A treacherous gasp escaped Odetta's lips. The absolute proximity was intoxicating. It scrambled her mortal senses. "You sent your men to burn my village," she breathed. She forced the accusation out. She needed to remember her hatred. She needed the anger to shield her from this consuming fire. "You slaughtered them." Thorn froze instantly. He lifted his head. His molten eyes locked onto hers. The feral rage receded, was replaced by genuine, stunning confusion. "I gave no such order, Soam," he said flatly. His tone held the unyielding truth of a king. "I have not sent soldiers to the southern borders in 5 years. Odetta stared at him. Her mind reeled. If he hadn't ordered the massacre, who did? The very foundation of her hatred cracked. She looked at his face. She saw the raw, unguarded honesty in his gaze. He wasn't the butcher. The tension between them shifted violently. It mutated from hostile to something entirely different, something magnetic. His gaze dropped to her lips. The air grew thick. It hummed with electric anticipation. Odetta's breath hitched. She couldn't look away. She didn't want to. Thorn tilted his head. He closed the final inch between them. A deafening explosion rocked the castle foundation. The stone walls violently trembled. Dust and mortar rained down from the ceiling. Alarms blared from the outer courtyard. The acrid scent of sulfur and burning timber flooded the chamber. "Rogues!" Thorn snarled. He stepped back quickly. His alpha instincts instantly overrode his burning desire. Before he could turn toward the doorway, the balcony glass shattered completely. A monstrous, scarred wolf burst through the ruined window. It was larger than any natural beast. Its fur was matted with dried blood and snow. It didn't pause. It lunged directly at Odetta. Colossal jaws clamped down viciously on her calf. Searing pain erupted up her leg. "Thorn!" she screamed. The rogue wolf jerked its head. It dragged her brutally across the floor and out into the freezing night. Chapter 3. The freezing night air ripped the breath from Odetta's lungs. Jagged teeth ground against her calf. She screamed, clawing desperately at the icy stone balcony. The rogue dragged her relentlessly toward the sheer drop. Inside the ruined chamber, a cacophony of snarls erupted. 3 more feral beasts poured through the shattered doorway. They launched themselves at Thorn in a synchronized suicidal wave. He roared, a sound that shook the very bedrock. He tore through the first attacker with lethal precision. Hot blood painted the ivory rugs. But the sheer mass of the remaining rogues held him back. He was a king, fighting a tidal wave. "Odetta!" he bellowed, his voice laced with raw terror. The monstrous wolf, hauling her, paused at the balcony edge. Its rancid breath washed over her face. It opened its colossal jaws for a killing strike aimed at her throat. Odetta threw her arm up in a desperate, futile block. A razor-sharp fang sliced deep into her forearm. Hot blood welled from the wound. It dripped onto the beast's waiting tongue. Then, the impossible happened. Her blood did not taste of mortal iron. It ignited. A blinding, incandescent silver flame erupted from the drops. The fire leaped from her skin to the wolf's maw. It did not burn like natural fire. It flared with a cold, terrifying brilliance. The scent of scorched ozone mixed with the copper tang of blood. The rogue released her instantly. It shrieked, a high fractured sound of absolute agony. The silver fire engulfed its snout, yet left no charred flesh. It was a fire of the soul. The towering beast collapsed onto the frost-covered stone. It whined pitifully. It pressed its belly to the floor and crawled toward her boots. The feral monster was groveling. It submitted entirely to her presence. Odetta scrambled backward. Her pulse roared in her ears, a frantic drumbeat of disbelief. The silver flame still danced across her bleeding arm. It cast an eerie, luminescent glow over her pale skin. She was terrified. She stared at her own hands as if they belonged to a demon. What was she? In the chamber, the remaining rogues had frozen. The oppressive, subjugating aura of the silver fire brought them to their knees. Thorn stood amidst the carnage, his golden eyes locked onto the glowing blood on her arm. The realization hit him with crushing force. She was not a mere mortal. She was a vessel, a myth whispered in the darkest corners of shifter history, the last of a bloodline capable of bringing any alpha to his knees. She was the ultimate weapon, an entity every king would kill to possess or destroy. And she was his mate. The rhythmic tramp of armored boots echoed from the hallway. A dozen elite guards stormed the ruined bedroom. They were led by the Grand Elder, an imposing figure draped in ceremonial furs. His gaze swept over the slaughtered rogues, over Thorn, and finally settled on the balcony. He saw the groveling beast. He saw the silver fire dancing on Odetta's skin. The Elder's face drained of color. Pure, unadulterated dread twisted his ancient features. A vessel, the Grand Elder gasped. The word hung in the freezing air like a death sentence. He pointed a trembling finger directly at Odetta. "Kill that demon immediately. It will turn us all into slaves." A dozen bows were raised in perfect unison. A dozen silver-tipped arrows aimed straight at Odetta's heart. Chapter 4. The silver-tipped arrows left their bowstrings with a lethal, synchronized hiss. Odetta squeezed her eyes shut. Death was finally here. But the impact never came. A colossal shadow eclipsed the moonlight. Thorn roared. The sound shattered the remaining glass and vibrated through the castle's foundation. He threw himself in front of her. His muscular arms swept outward, batting the deadly projectiles away like brittle twigs. Silver scorched his forearms. It left smoking trails on his golden skin. He did not even flinch. He pulled Odetta flush against his broad chest. His golden eyes locked onto the Grand Elder. The sheer, crushing dominance of the Alpha King flooded the ruined chamber. "Lower your weapons," Thorn commanded. The words were a dark, absolute law. "She is my mate. She is your Luna. Whoever draws a bow against her will forfeit their head." The guards wavered. Their hands trembled violently under the suffocating weight of his aura. The Elder opened his mouth to protest. Pippin chose that exact second to strike. The thief dropped a stolen alchemical vial directly into the hearth. A blinding cloud of thick violet smoke erupted. It choked the guards and blinded the ancient council members. "Hold on," Thorn ordered. He scooped Odetta up effortlessly. They vaulted over the shattered balcony. The freezing wind slapped Odetta's face. They plummeted toward the snow-covered courtyard below. Thorn landed with a bone-jarring impact. He absorbed the shock entirely. Without a second of hesitation, he sprinted toward the towering peaks of the forbidden northern mountains. The blizzard screamed like a dying beast. Hours blurred into a freezing, agonizing haze. Thorn kicked open the door of an abandoned hunting cabin near the summit. The interior was impossibly small. It smelled of ancient pine dust and decay. He set her gently onto a dilapidated cot. He moved with swift, silent purpose, sparking a fire in the crumbling hearth. The temperature slowly began to rise. Odetta shivered uncontrollably. The bleeding on her calf had stopped, but the pain throbbed in a sick rhythm. Thorn knelt beside the cot. His imposing frame took up half the tiny room. He produced a clean linen cloth and a canteen of melted snow. "This will sting," he murmured softly. His calloused fingers brushed her freezing skin. The touch was electric. It sent a sudden, traitorous jolt of heat straight to her core. He cleaned the jagged bite wound with absolute heartbreaking devotion. He handled her like she was made of spun glass. "You are a vessel," he stated quietly. He bandaged the injury with careful precision. A myth come to life. Odetta swallowed the dry lump in her throat. "The elder said I would turn you into a slave, that I would force you to kneel." She searched his face for fear. She found none. Thorn stopped moving. He lifted his gaze. Those molten amber eyes bored directly into her soul. He remained on his knees before her. "You do not need ancient magic to bring me to my knees, Odetta." He reached out, his thumb tracing the frantic pulse at her throat. "I would gladly bow to you, not out of subjugation, but out of willing reverence for my mate." The last of her resistance crumbled into dust. The hatred she had nurtured for years vanished. It was replaced by an overwhelming, terrifying need. She leaned forward, her hands tangled in his thick, dark hair. She pulled his mouth down to hers. Thorn groaned. It was a rough, desperate sound. He kissed her with starving intensity. The kiss was a collision of fire and ice. It was demanding, possessive, and utterly consuming. His taste intoxicated her. It was sharp pine and wild desire. Odetta's heart hammered a frantic, impossible rhythm. A tidal wave of pure emotion surged through her blood. It was too much. The ancient dormant power inside her fractured its fragile cage. Silver fire erupted from her skin. It was blinding and sudden. The cold flames jumped from her hands directly onto Thorn's chest. The Alpha King tore away from her. He gasped in absolute agony. The silver fire seared his flesh. He collapsed onto the wooden floorboards. His eyes rolled back. His breathing turned into a shallow, desperate wheeze. "Thorn!" Odetta screamed. The sound tore from her throat. She dropped to her knees beside his convulsing form. The silver flames licked across his broad chest. They did not consume his flesh. They devoured his life force. His golden eyes flickered, rolling back into his skull. His breaths became shallow, erratic gasps. She pressed her palms against his burning skin. The heat blistered her fingers. "Please, no, don't leave me." Tears blurred her vision. Her hatred was entirely gone. Only a terrifying, hollow dread remained. She had finally found her mate, and her own cursed blood was killing him. A sudden clatter at the window startled her. Pippin tumbled through the frosty opening. He was bruised and shivering, clutching a crumbling leather-bound tome to his chest. "I stole it from the Grand Elder's archives," the thief panted. He dropped the leaden book onto the wooden floorboards. "Before they chased me up the mountain, it explains the vessel." Odetta scrambled toward the ancient text. She flipped frantically through the yellowed, brittle pages. Her eyes scanned the faded ink. The silver fire is a soul tether. It demands an absolute anchor. Only the claiming bond can absorb the vessel's unrestrained power. She looked at Thorn. His skin was turning an ashen gray. The colossal king was dying. There was no time for hesitation. Odetta crawled back to his side. She unbuttoned the collar of her tunic, exposing the fragile, beating pulse at her throat. She leaned over him. The scent of ozone and dying pine filled her lungs. "Thorn," she whispered fiercely. She pressed her cheek against his cooling face. "Wake up. Claim me." He did not move. His pulse was a fading, erratic flutter. "I am yours," she sobbed. She dragged his limp hand up to her racing heart. "Do you hear me? I surrender. I am your mate. Take it." Somewhere deep within the dying king, the wolf heard her plea. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through his chest. His amber eyes snapped open, blazing with a sudden feral intensity. He moved with the desperate final surge of a dying predator. His hands tangled in her hair. He pulled her down, his lips crashing against hers. The kiss was a collision of life and death. It was desperate. It was utterly consuming. Odetta opened her mouth to him. She surrendered every defense, every wall she had ever built. Thorn shifted his grip. His fangs grazed the sensitive, frantic pulse at her neck. A sharp, searing pain erupted as he bit down. Odetta gasped, arching her spine. The pain instantly mutated into a wave of blinding, euphoric heat. The silver fire engulfing his chest surged upward. It flowed through the bite mark, rushing back into her veins. Their souls slammed together in a profound, earth-shattering connection. She felt his fierce love, his unyielding protectiveness, and his absolute devotion. He felt her terrifying power and her complete, willing surrender. The physical world dissolved around them. The freezing cabin faded away. There was only the blistering heat of their entwined bodies. Thorn pulled her flush against him. He worshipped her skin, claiming every inch of her with reverent, starving touches. The slow burn finally ignited into a wild, uncontrollable inferno. Two fractured souls merged perfectly into one. When dawn broke, the blizzard had finally ceased. Odetta lay safely cocooned against Thorn's imposing chest. The silver fire was entirely gone. His heartbeat was a strong, steady drum against her ear. The claiming mark throbbed pleasantly on her neck. Absolute peace settled over her. Then the solid oak door exploded inward. Splintered wood rained across the cabin. The freezing mountain air rushed back in. A towering figure stepped through the ruined threshold. He was clad in dark furs, his face hidden behind a scarred, terrifying wolf mask. He held a brutally beaten, bloody Pippin by the scruff of the neck. The intruder tossed the thief carelessly onto the floorboards. He looked directly at Odetta and smiled. It was a cold, familiar, horrifying smile. The smile of the man who had burned her village to ashes. "I have searched for you for 5 years," the true rogue leader purred. He stepped over the broken door. "I have come to take back my weapon." Chapter 6. The intruder's laughter echoed like cracking ice. It was a vile, grating sound that desecrated the absolute peace of the cabin. Thorn was on his feet in a fraction of a second. He did not bother reaching for a weapon. He was the weapon. The silver fire from their bond still thrummed beneath his golden skin, making him look like a vengeful, towering god. He shielded Odetta entirely with his imposing frame. "You burned her home," Thorn snarled. His voice was a lethal, vibrating rumble that shook the frost from the ceiling beams. "You slaughtered innocents to breed hatred in a vessel." "A necessary forge," the rogue leader sneered. He tossed Pippin aside. The thief slid across the floorboards, unconscious but breathing. "I needed a weapon forged in pure agony, a vessel consumed by vengeance to break the invincible Alpha King." The rogue reached beneath his dark furs. He produced a jagged obsidian amulet. It pulsed with a sickening necrotic energy. The scent of rotting earth and dried blood flooded the cramped room. "But if the weapon will not strike," the rogue murmured, crushing the amulet within his fist, "I will force the king to break himself." A suffocating leaden shockwave slammed into the cabin. Thorn staggered backward. A horrific, jagged gasp tore from his throat. He dropped to one knee. The brilliant amber of his eyes began to cloud. A murky, venomous green shadow crept across his irises. The dark magic sought to violently overwrite his consciousness. It commanded him to slaughter the mate he had just claimed. Odetta felt the brutal invasion instantly. Through the raw, newly forged claiming mark on her neck, his agony flooded her senses. It was a crushing, blinding pain. She could feel his magnificent mind fracturing under the dark compulsion. Thorn turned his head toward her, his claws extended, scoring deep gouges into the wooden floor. He was fighting a losing battle against a monstrous, ancient spell. "Run!" Thorn choked out. Blood dripped from his clenched jaw. "Odetta, run!" She did not move. The old Odetta would have fled. The assassin would have recognized a lethal threat and vanished into the blizzard. But she was no longer a solitary blade in the dark. She was a Luna. She was a vessel. And this was her mate. Odetta stepped forward. She placed her bare hands directly onto his trembling, broad shoulders. She did not use her ancient bloodline to command him. She did not force him into subjugation. Instead, she opened the floodgates of her soul. She sent every ounce of her love, her fierce protectiveness, and her blinding silver fire directly into their bond. The silver flame did not burn him this time. It merged with his essence. It coated his mind in an impenetrable, ethereal armor. Thorn inhaled a massive, shuddering breath. The murky green shadow in his eyes shattered like brittle glass. The blinding, molten gold returned, magnified 100-fold by her radiant power. The dark compulsion incinerated into nothingness. He rose to his full, terrifying height. The rogue leader took a frantic step backward, his cruel smile vanishing into absolute panic. "Impossible," the rogue stammered. Thorn launched himself forward. He was a blur of golden light and lethal fury. The rogue barely managed to draw a rusted broadsword. It was a futile gesture. Thorn's claws sheared straight through the steel blade. He slammed the rogue against the timber wall with bone-crushing force. There was no prolonged interrogation. There was no mercy. Thorn protected his mate with the swift, brutal efficiency of an apex predator. He tore the rogue apart, ending the 5-year nightmare in a matter of seconds. The tyrant collapsed into a ruined, lifeless heap. Absolute silence reclaimed the cabin. Thorn stood amidst the carnage. He was panting heavily, his chest heaving with exertion. The scent of spilled blood mingled with his intoxicating aroma of crushed pine and rain. He slowly turned to face Odetta. He did not look at her with fear. He did not see a demon capable of enslaving his kind. He looked at her glowing skin and silver-lit eyes with overwhelming, fierce pride. Odetta rushed forward. She threw her arms around his thick neck. Thorn caught her effortlessly, burying his face in the crook of her shoulder. He inhaled her scent in deep, grounding breaths. The frantic beating of his heart slowly synchronized with hers. "My beautiful weapon," Thorn murmured against her skin. His voice was thick with emotion. "My Luna." The war was finally over. 1 month later, the great hall of the capital was packed to the brim. Thousands of shifters murmured in anxious anticipation. The cavernous room smelled of polished marble, burning beeswax, and profound nervousness. The Grand Elder stood near the imposing obsidian throne, his ancient hands trembling slightly. The heavy oak doors swung open. Odetta stepped into the hall. She wore an elegant gown of spun silver silk. It flowed around her like liquid moonlight. The claiming mark on her neck was proudly displayed. She walked with the quiet, unyielding grace of a queen who knew her exact worth. Thorn strode beside her. He was clad in impeccable golden royal robes. He radiated absolute, unchallenged dominance. He did not look like a king who had been diminished by a powerful mate. He looked invincible. They reached the dais. The crowd held its collective breath. The rumors had spread like wildfire. A vessel had claimed the king. The elders expected her to subjugate him. They braced for the humiliating sight of their alpha being magically forced into submission. Odetta turned to face the vast crowd. She did not raise a hand. She did not summon the silver fire. She simply looked at her mate. Thorn stepped forward. He looked out at his thousands of subjects. Then, with deliberate, breathtaking grace, the most powerful Alpha King in a century lowered his towering frame. He dropped to one knee against the polished marble floor. A collective stunned gasp echoed through the cavernous hall. The Grand Elder nearly dropped his ceremonial staff. Thorn took Odetta's delicate hand in his massive calloused ones. He looked up at her, his golden eyes shining with pure, absolute devotion. There was no magic forcing him down. There was no spell commanding his body. This was a voluntary, willful offering of his heart and his kingdom. He pressed a reverent, searing kiss to her knuckles. "My queen," Thorn declared. His voice resonated through the silent hall, echoing off the high stone arches. "My mate, my equal." It was not an act of weakness. It was the ultimate display of strength. It was a promise that shattered centuries of fear and prejudice. Odetta smiled. A genuine radiant warmth illuminated her features. She gently pulled him back to his feet. They stood shoulder to shoulder before the throne, their fingers tightly interlaced. The golden aura of the wolf and the silver fire of the vessel pulsed in perfect, harmonious rhythm. The crowd erupted into a deafening, thunderous roar of approval. The dark days of war and deception were entirely erased. A new era had begun, forged not in hatred, but in the unbreakable, fiercely protective bond of true mates.